Good evening. Welcome to Ostrov Auditorium. I'm Dan Shea, Director of the Goldfarb Center for Public Affairs and Civic Engagement and Professor of Government here at Colby College. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. First, for those of you that are watching online and even in the audience, the Twitter hashtag is, whatever Twitter is, Colby College. If you would Twitter some questions, we'll get to some of those during our Q and answer period. This event marks the inaugural lecture of a new series, From Passion to Purpose, Writing After Colby. It's sponsored by the Goldfarb Center, the Colby Center for the Arts and Humanities, the Colby Writing Center, and the Farnham Writers Center. As we all know, writing is a foundational aspect of liberal arts education. The analytical, interdisciplinary, and humanistic education that students receive at Colby forms a foundation for success as writers and public communicators in a wide variety of settings. The aim of the new program is to showcase how Colby authors, Colby alumni, including some who never imagined they would become high-profile writers, turned a passion into a significant civic, cultural, or personal purpose through writing. My colleagues Carol O'Neill, Stacy Sheriff, and Paul Harrington and I, when we conceived the program, we knew that we'd have no shortage of speakers. So many Colby alumni, scientists, actors, environmentalists, economists, doctors, scholars, activists, have used the written word to promote a cause and to make an important difference. We also knew that Dan Harris would be perfect to kick off this new series, and we're so lucky to have him here tonight. For one, Dan's rise in television journalism has been nothing short of dramatic. After graduating from Colby in 1993, he began his broadcast career as a reporter with WLBZ in Bangor and later with WCSH in Portland. He then became an anchor for the New England Cable News, and in 2000 he joined ABC News. As a reporter with ABC, Dan covered mass shootings in Newtown, Aurora, Tucson, natural disasters from Haiti to New Orleans. He covered combat in Afghanistan, Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, and he made 6 visits to Iraq during the war. He's asked frank questions to drug lords and lawless slums of Rio and the heads of Philip Morris International on the sales of cigarettes to Indonesian children. Dan has made it a priority to shine a light on the world's most vulnerable populations. In 2010, he was named co-anchor of the weekend edition of Good Morning America, and 3 years later, co-anchor of Nightline. If that didn't keep him busy enough, he regularly files reports for World News with Diane Sawyer and Good Morning America. He received an Edward R. Murrow Award for his reporting on a young Iraqi man trying to move to America, and in 2009, an Emmy for a Nightline report, How to Buy a Child in 10 Hours. But Dan also made sense for the series because his book, 10% Happier, has done so darn well. In one of the interviews about the book, Dan said that he and his wife Bianca used to joke that whenever he stepped away to write, he was going to work on the worst book ever written, a book that nobody would ever read. Well, it hasn't worked out that way. It skyrocketed on the New York Times bestseller list for nonfiction hardcover to number 1, and it stayed on that list for months. This morning, it was number 6 on the paperback bestseller list. And that's a year after its release. Goodreads gives it an average of 3.9 stars out of 4, with over 10,000 votes. On Amazon, it's 4.5 stars with 1,500 reviews. Who gets 1,500 reviews? George Stephanopoulos said it is a spiritual adventure from a master storyteller. GQ said it is part memoir, part science, part self-help. Harris outlines specific ways to learn to chill the blank out. Parade said he crushes stereotypes about meditation. USA Today said it is revealing, recommended to anyone. The folks at the Richmond Times-Dispatch said, by letting us hear the voice in his head, before and after he starts meditating, Harris makes a convincing case that if he can do it, we can do it too. It's a frank, revealing, insightful, and at many points, a wicked funny book. So finally, it's a pleasure to have Dan here on campus to usher in the new series, because the message of the book is so important. Learning to tame the voice in our heads is a vital skill for everyone, but especially valuable, in my view, for those who study and work at a place like Colby. You see, we work very hard on Mayflower Hill. We are resolute, we are earnest, determined to succeed, to do well, to make the grade, to take the college to the next level. We embrace the edge that has been an important part of Dan's career. But many of us probably also stick too close to Dan's father's adage that the price of security is insecurity. We perpetually scan our consciousness for concern. We hold that success can only be achieved through hypervigilance. We react instead of respond. But your journey, Dan, tells us that mindfulness is not incompatible with success, with the edge. Your smart, heartwarming, provocative book will help us master the vulnerabilities of the mind. We are so grateful that you've come back to your alma mater. Please welcome Dan Harris.
The most embarrassing part of giving a talk is when you follow somebody who's taller than you. You have to go like this with the mic. Sucks. So I was having this moment of like, wow, it must be pretty important. I'm walking in here and it's an overflow crowd. And right before I went out to go to the bathroom, and I overheard some of the kids talking that they're only here because you get a wellness credit. I was like really excited. I couldn't get a date when I was a student here. And I was like, I got 200 people showing up to see me talk, and it's a wellness credit. I should have used that to try to get dates. I'm going to apologize in advance because I haven't been, there was a period of time when the book came out, I was giving a talk a lot, and that's slowed down a little bit, largely because a couple months ago, my wife and I had our first baby. So thank you. In fact, a couple of weeks after we had the baby, maybe even a couple of days after we had the baby, I was standing there with this screaming child and his poop everywhere, and I realized, like, I think the title of my next book is going to be Everything in My Last Book Was Bullshit. So I work blue, I swear, when I don't have to be on television. So I'm just going to warn you of that now. I know there's a camera here from Maine Public Broadcasting. Get your beep button ready. So if you had told me back when I was a Colby kid, or any time in the many, many years that have followed, I think actually my math is that when I graduated in '93, you guys weren't born yet. It's really depressing. You will get here too. If you had told me not long ago that I was ever going to become a traveling evangelist for meditation, I would have coughed my beer up through my nose. This was not something I saw coming. But weird things happen. And for me, it started with a panic attack on national television, which I'm going to show you. This happened about 10 years ago on we do a little show some of you might have heard of. It's called Good Morning America. And after the panic attack, or in the process of writing the book, because I'm a huge masochist, I had our research department go back and look up exactly how many people were watching. 5.019 million. So no big deal. And in this little clip I'm going to show you now, I give a blow-by-blow account of my on-air Waterloo. Here it is.
From ABC News, this is Good Morning America.
Welcome to the most embarrassing day of my life.
We're going to go now to Dan Harris, who's at the news desk. Dan.
Good morning, Charlie and Diane. Thank you.
This is me 10 years ago. And the reason this is the most embarrassing day of my life is not that it looks like I've been attacked by a blow dryer and a can of hairspray. No, it's that I am about to freak out on national television. Health news now. One of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report People who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer, but it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production. At this point, I realize I'm helpless, so I bail right in the middle. That does it for news. We're going to go back now to Robin and Charlie.
All right, thanks very much. Dan Harris at the news desk with some of the headlines of the morning. Want to go to Tony Perkins now. He is...
Once the fear subsided, humiliation rushed in. I knew with rock-solid certainty that I had just had a panic attack on national television.
So I usually get one of two reactions to that. Some people, like Dan Shea, said over dinner, yeah, I watched it, it didn't look like a big deal. Other people, anybody who's had just a taste of panic knows exactly what you're looking at. Whatever your reaction is, the internal reality was thunderously clear, which was that I was having a panic attack, and it was the scariest, worst moment of my life. And in a weird and windy way that we'll discuss tonight, it ultimately led me to things that made my life significantly better. What I will tell you about that in a minute. But first, I want to tell you about the backstory. Because I think at the root of that freak out was something that I am quite confident everybody in this room shares, which is a desire to be great at what you do. I arrived at ABC News in the year 2000. This is the picture they took of me on the first day. It's still on my security ID. A friend of mine has joked that if you take a wide shot, it looks like I might be holding a balloon. So I was 28 years old, and I was working with giants, Peter Jennings, Diane Sawyer, Barbara Walters, and I felt incredibly insecure. I was completely green, and my way of coping with this insecurity was to become a workaholic. Dan mentioned it. My father has this motto, which is the price of security is insecurity. So I come from a family that venerates worrying, and I just took that to the hoop. When I got to ABC News, I was constantly worrying about what my status was with the executives and the various anchors, and when was the last story I had on the air. And not long after I arrived, 9/11 happened, and I raised my hand to go cover whatever happened next, frankly, without thinking much about the psychological consequences. And actually, here's a picture of me with the nice young men from the Taliban in October or November of 2001. So not long after 9/11, I got into Kandahar and spent some time with the Taliban, and that was my first experience in a war zone. And the truth is, and this is going to sound a little crass, but I loved it. And I felt it was important, and it was incredibly thrilling. And I was hooked. I spent the subsequent years in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza Strip. As Dan mentioned, I made 6 or 7 trips to Iraq. And when I got home from one particularly long and hairy run in Iraq in the summer of 2003, I got depressed. And somewhat embarrassingly, I didn't actually know I was depressed until, well, a while later, although I was exhibiting what I now know to be the classic signs and symptoms. I was having trouble getting out of bed. I felt like I had a low-grade fever all the time. And at this point, I did a phenomenally stupid thing, which was I started to self-medicate with recreational drugs, including cocaine and ecstasy. At this point in the talk, there's always like a hush in the room. I hasten to add, it wasn't like the Wolf of Wall Street. It was reasonably sporadic, never when I was working, definitely not when I was on the air. As I like to say, I was stupid, but not that stupid. In any event, after the panic attack, I went to a doctor, a shrink, an expert in panic, and I didn't even know they had such things. And he asked me a series of questions to try to get to the root of the problem. And one of the questions he asked was, do you do drugs? And I kind of sheepishly said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, actually, he didn't say anything. He leaned back in his chair and gave me a look that communicated the following sentiment, which was, okay, asshole, mystery solved. And he explained that even though I had only been doing it once in a while, it was enough to artificially raise the level of adrenaline in my brain and prime me to have a panic attack. Actually, 2 panic attacks. So that was a huge aha moment for me. I realized what a moron I'd been, and I made 2 big decisions right there. One is I quit doing drugs, which is kind of a no-brainer. And the other is I agreed to go see this shrink once or twice a week indefinitely. So that was about 10 years ago. I actually still see him once in a while. But this isn't a neat, clean after-school special. It wasn't like I had this moment and I started meditating and then my life was nonstop unicorns and rainbows. Something else had to happen, which was actually precipitated by this gentleman, Peter Jennings, who actually died 10 years ago, but some of you may remember him. He was a dominant figure in American television news, and I was lucky enough to have him as a mentor. Although I didn't feel lucky at the moment I'm about to describe, which is the day that he took me aside and said that you, Dan Harris, are now going to become the faith and spirituality reporter for ABC News. I grew up in the People's Republic of Massachusetts. My parents are very much secular scientists, and I did have a bar mitzvah, but only for the money. So this was not my bag. I just like, look, Peter, I love you, but I didn't say that. But I said, Peter, I don't want to do this, and he said, I don't care. And so I was doing it, and then all of a sudden I spent a lot of time in Mormon temples and mosques and megachurches, and it turned out to be great for me. I made a lot of new friends. I learned how ignorant I was on this issue, and I really saw the value of having a worldview that transcends your own narrow interests, which was useful for me as a young guy on the make. And that said, none of what I encountered as a religion reporter spoke to me personally. I didn't go kosher or anything like that, although I found it very, very interesting. But that changed, actually, in the year 2008. So many years after my panic attack, which was in 2004, and many years after getting assigned to cover faith and spirituality, one of my producers recommended I read a book by this guy. His name is Eckhart Tolle. Has anybody heard of him? All right, so you guys get your wellness credit. I hadn't heard of him, so don't worry if you haven't. He is a hugely successful hugely successful best-selling self-help writer, and celebrities love him. Oprah loves him. Paris Hilton carried his book into jail on her DUI charge. He's a big deal. But I didn't really know anything about him, and my producer was arguing that, look, he's making waves, maybe we should do a story on him. So I ordered his book, not thinking it was going to be useful for me in any way, but thinking maybe it sounded like exotic enough for us to do a TV story on. And I started to read the book, and at first I thought it was irredeemable garbage, just filled with all this weird language about vibrational fields and pseudoscientific assertions and grandiose claims about how this book was going to provoke for you, the reader, a spiritual awakening, whatever that means, and how after his own spiritual awakening, he spent 2 years living on park benches in a state of bliss in the city of London. I'm not a meteorologist, but I understand that they have a winter there. So I was skeptical about that claim, among others, and overall not super impressed by this dude. However, as I continued to read, he started to unfurl a thesis about the human condition that I had never heard before and that I found extraordinarily compelling. His argument is that we all have a voice in our heads, by which he's not referring to schizophrenia or hearing voices. He's talking about your inner narrator, the inner you, that chases you out of bed in the morning and is yammering at you all day long, has you constantly wanting stuff, rejecting stuff, judging other people, comparing yourself to other people, criticizing yourself harshly. Here's one of the hallmarks: constantly thinking about the past, thinking about the future to the detriment of whatever's happening right now. I have a friend named Sam Harris who's a very successful writer, and we're not related, however. He says that when he considers the voice in his head, he feels like he's been kidnapped by the most boring person alive, who says the same shit over and over, most of it negative, all of it self-referential. And when you're unaware, per totally, when you're unaware of this nonstop conversation that you are having with yourselves, it yanks you around. It's why you find yourself with your hand in the fridge when you're not hungry. You're checking your email in the middle of a conversation with another human being, losing your temper when it's strategically unwise. And for me, reading this was a huge aha moment, another huge aha moment, because I realized, A, this is just intuitively true. I can tell from the nodding heads. And B, this thesis explained the most embarrassing moment of my life. That voice in the head is why I went to war zones without thinking about the consequences, came home, got depressed, was insufficiently self-aware to know it, and then blindly self-medicated and just blew up in my face. Suffice it to say, it was a little bit embarrassing to be reading a book by this guy and thinking he gets me. But the bigger problem, bigger than the bruise to my ego, was that as far as I could tell, there was no actionable advice for dealing with the voice in the head in this book. I looked hard, I just couldn't see anything. So I agreed with my producer that, yes, we should interview him. And so I flew to Toronto, and I'm sitting face to face with Eckhart Tolle. And the first question I asked him is, okay, what do you do about the voice in the head? Big moment for me. Takes a beat, and he says, take one conscious breath. The voice in my head is saying, what the fuck does that mean? And I pressed him, and I got nothing. So it got even weirder, actually, because at some point in the interview, I asked him whether he ever gets into a bad mood, and here's what he said.
Don't you ever get annoyed, irritated, sad, anything negative?
No, I accept what is. And that's why life has become so simple.
Well, if somebody cuts you off in your car?
It's fine. It's like a sudden gust of wind. I don't personalize a gust of wind. And so it's simply what is.
And you're able to enjoy every moment, even if I start asking you a ton of annoying questions.
Yes, that would be fine. So it's really...
Don't tempt me.
He's a very frustrating man. So it was like, I said this in the book, it's like he pointed out that my hair was on fire and then steadfastly refused to give me a fire extinguisher. And so I didn't know what else to do. I mean, I was like really interested in what he was talking about, but I was stuck. So I actually, at this point, threw myself into the world of self-help, which I pretty quickly learned is not a pretty place, and filled with people who will tell you that you can get whatever you want through the power of positive thinking. I can get on my high horse about this particular topic in the Q&A if you want. Suffice it to say, I was not impressed. So yet here I am again, stuck. One night I came home from work and my then fiance and now baby mama, Bianca, she prefers wife, I don't know, it's weird. She said, I've been hearing you talk about the voice in the head and Eckhart Tolle with varying levels of cogency, and I have a gift for you. And she hands me these books by this guy, that guy, Mark Epstein, who is a shrink who lives in New York City, who writes about the overlap between psychology and Buddhism. And as I started reading through the book, I started reading it that night, and I had another aha moment. I realized actually all the stuff that I found most compelling in Eckhart Tolle's book seemed to have been lifted largely without attribution from the Buddha. So it turns out that, well, I'll say that in a second, but let me as a brief aside. Notwithstanding the fact that I was ostensibly a religion reporter, I actually knew nothing about Buddhism, like pretty much zero, other than the fact that I had stolen a Buddha statue from a local gardening store as a 15-year-old punk kid and put it in my bedroom because I thought it looked vaguely cool. As it turns out, this person who heretofore was known only to me as a lawn ornament 2,500 years before Tolley started cashing his royalty checks, it was this guy who was talking about the voice in the head. He had a different terminology. He called it the monkey mind. His argument is that our minds are like furry little primates, constantly just hurling ourselves through a forest of urges and impulses and desires, always latching onto things that will not last in a universe that is characterized by impermanence, and hurling ourselves from one hit of pleasant experience, one meal, one movie, one social encounter, one kegger, to the next, and yet never fully satisfied. I mean, think about it. How many great vacations, how many awesome Jan plans, how many A+ have you gotten? And are you done? Of course not. We are insatiable. And in this way, the pursuit of happiness, which we, I think, rightly venerate in this country, but the pursuit of happiness can become the source of our unhappiness. Unlike Eckhart Tolle, the Buddha actually had a very practical, comprehensible piece of advice for dealing with the monkey mind. At this point, a fresh problem arose, but because what the Buddha was recommending, I found to be deeply repellent, and that is meditation. It was my view at the time that meditation was only for hippies and freaks and people who live in a yurt and are deeply into aromatherapy and Cat Stevens and John Tesh and collect crystals and make God's eyes and dream catchers and wear little finger symbols and use the word namaste without irony. As it turns out, I was not entirely wrong about that, actually. My view of meditation was very well summed up by Alec Baldwin's character on 30 Rock, who said the following.
Meditation is a waste of time, like learning French or kissing after sex.
I don't actually believe that. Just want to be clear. It's a funny clip. However, I started to do some research about meditation, and I found that there's an enormous amount of science that suggests it's really good for you. This science is very much in its early stages, but it's strongly suggestive of a long list of health benefits, everything from lowering the release of stress hormones to lowering your blood pressure, boosting your immune system, mitigating depression, anxiety, ADHD, age-related cognitive decline. Not a problem for you yet. It's even been shown to help with seemingly unrelated things like irritable bowel syndrome and psoriasis, which both have a stress component. And speaking of the science, things get really sci-fi when we start talking about the neuroscience, because in recent years, scientists have been peering into the brains of meditators, and what they're finding is that when you meditate, you are in effect performing a kind of neurosurgery on yourself. And it's not just people who wear robes, by the way. I'm going to tell you about, very briefly, about a study from Harvard in 2011, where they took people who had never meditated before, and they scanned their brains. And then, in the following 8 weeks, these people did short daily doses of meditation, and then they scanned their brains again. And what they found at the end of 8 weeks of short little bursts of meditation every day, the area of the brain associated with self-awareness and with compassion, the gray matter literally grew. And in the area of the brain associated with stress, the gray matter literally shrank. Really compelling. And then I learned that meditation does not involve necessarily a lot of the things that I had assumed it would involve. For example, you don't have to sit in a funny position. That's Ruby, one of our cats. The woman who took that picture, whose name rhymes with Shmianka, does not like when I say that Ruby is basking in the reflective glow of the Real Housewives of New Jersey. But that is true. So you don't have to sit in a funny position. You don't have to join a group. You don't have to light incense. You don't have to chant in Sanskrit. You don't have to believe in anything. You don't have to wear special outfits. Meditation is simple and secular and scientifically validated. And in fact, it only involves 3 steps. I want to be clear, the word meditation is a little bit like the word sports. It can describe a whole variety of things. But when I talk about meditation, I'm talking about mindfulness meditation, which is, as I said, secular, and simple, and it involves only 3 steps. So I'm not going to make you do it, but I'm just going to explain it to you. By the way, I taught one of the tech reporters from the New York Times how to meditate in fewer letters than it takes to send a tweet. So this is not complex. 3 steps. First step is sit comfortably with your back reasonably straight and your eyes closed. The second step is to notice, to really bring your full attention to the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. You want to pick a spot where the breath feels most prominent. So usually that's your chest or your nose or your belly. And the third step is the key. As soon as you try to do this, as soon as you try to just pay attention to the feeling of your breath coming in and going out, your mind is going to go nuts. You're going to start thinking about, what am I going to have for lunch? Why did I say that stupid thing to my professor? Why did Dances with Wolves beat Goodfellas for Best Picture in 1991 before I was born? Why do celebrities only marry other celebrities? Whatever. Your mind's going to go off. And that's fine. That the whole game is just noticing when you've gotten distracted and starting again and again and again. And you're going to have to do it over and over and over. And that is a bicep curl for your brain. And it shows up on the brain scans. It is also, not for nothing, a radical act. Because when you notice that you're distracted and not paying attention to whatever's happening right now, and you stop yourself from doing that, you break a lifetime's habit of walking around in a fog of memory and projection. And you're doing this radical thing of just paying attention to whatever's happening right now, which very few of us ever do. So after I learned all that, I decided to give it a shot. This is a picture Bianca took of me when we were on vacation in the Bahamas, and those are some opportunistic chickens trying to bum rush me. And I'm not gonna. I started with 5 to 10 minutes a day, which is, by the way, I think all you need to do. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like it. It's hard. It's exercise for your brain, especially at the beginning. It's hard. I like to say, if you go to the gym and it's easy, you are cheating. And if you're meditating and it's easy, you're either enlightened or you're dead. In fact, I think we've been ill-served by the traditional art around meditation, which shows people with beatific looks on their faces. This was a recent cover of Time magazine. I think this is actually unhelpful on 2 levels. One is you don't have to be white to meditate. This was invented by a Nepali/Indian guy 2,500 years ago. So I think that is a misconception. But it is also a misconception that you're going to float off into cosmic ooze when you sit down to meditate. The facial expression should be more like gritted teeth, because it is difficult. I wanted this to be the cover of my book. I really did, actually. I paid a guy who did this, because I was fighting with my publisher about what was going to be on the cover, and they thought this was too arty. Maybe they're right, I don't know, but I like it. So I started doing it. I started meditating, and pretty quickly, I mean, I'm talking about like within weeks, I started to see 2 big benefits. One is it helped my ability to focus. The daily exercise of sitting down, trying to focus on one thing, getting lost, starting over, getting lost, starting over, really helped me focus. And I got to tell you, I have a very hectic job. We all have hectic lives. I'm not trying to compare, but I think objectively speaking, my profession is reasonably hectic. I have other people's voices piped directly into my head. And I need to get the facts straight on short notice and with reasonably high stakes in front of a pretty large audience. And the ability to hone in on what the task was, or the task is, has been a huge value add. But the bigger benefit is this bland-sounding word, mindfulness. Don't be fooled. This is actually a game-changing proposition. And the only important thing I will say tonight, mindfulness is the ability to know what's going on in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. I'm going to say that again. Mindfulness is the skill of knowing what's happening in your squash right now without necessarily taking the bait and acting on it. So let me give you a hypothetical of how this might work. You're online at Starbucks or at the spa. Do you guys still have the spa? Okay. You're online, somebody cuts you off. Generally speaking, how does that go? I think generally speaking, most of us have an uninvited thought, which is, I'm pissed. What happens next? we automatically, habitually, reflexively inhabit that thought. We actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and our blind reaction to it. With mindfulness on board, with a little bit of meditation, you might, in that moment, notice, oh, my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting angry. But I don't necessarily need to take the bait and yell at this person or say something stupid or whatever. So you can imagine how scalable that is in a life. It is a little bit like, and I don't know if TVs still have this capacity, but the picture-in-picture button on your TV, for most of us, the voice in our head is taking up the whole screen. We have no perspective on our thoughts and our urges and our impulses. But if you can, with mindfulness, it's a little bit like pressing a picture-in-picture button. You see what's happening in your noggin with just a little bit of perspective. Here's another way to think about it. I drew this, which is why it looks so shitty, but this is a waterfall. You can think about your, I know, the ugliest waterfall in the history of waterfalls. You can think about your mind a little bit like a waterfall. So you've got the rushing water. Those are your thoughts and your urges and your impulses, most of them surrounding, sort of circling around me. Mindfulness is the space behind the water. It allows you to step out of the traffic and see the contents of your consciousness with some non-judgmental remove. Just in case you think I'm just making this up, we are classified as a species as Homo sapiens sapiens, the one who thinks and knows he thinks. And that second sapiens has atrophied over time because nobody points out to us that we have this bonus level in our minds that allows you to step out of the traffic and watch what's happening without getting carried away by it. So let me just take you back to that Starbucks/Colby Spa analogy. I suspect some of you might be thinking, aren't there times in my life where I'm justified in getting angry? I think the answer is yes, but probably less than you might think. The proposition here is not that you will never get angry or that you should be rendered some lifeless, non-judgmental blob, just passively letting things happen. The proposition here is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things rather than reacting blindly. Most meditation cliches make me want to put a pencil through my eye, but this cliche, respond, not react, is, as I said before, a game changer. It's obviously become an attractive proposition for a lot of people in the professional world, which is why a surprising gaggle of companies now offer meditation to employees, like Google, Procter & Gamble, Aetna, Target, General Mills. General Mills, I like to point out, these are the people that make Hamburger Helper. They have meditation rooms in every single building on their corporate headquarters in Minnetonka, Minnesota. I think that is a sign that this thing is taken off. It is also taken off in Silicon Valley. This is an article from Wired magazine in which they refer to mindfulness as Silicon Valley's new caffeine. I love the irony of the fact that the people who are inventing the products are destroying our ability to focus are now embracing this ancient technique to aid their ability to focus. It is also taken off in the sports world. That's the, this is a tough audience to say this, but that is the audience, that is the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, who were beaten by our hometown cheaters, the Patriots. But they won the year before, as you might recall. Anyway, they're a good team. They have a meditation coach. Novak Djokovic, meditator. The New York Knicks, not doing so well, but they started meditating this year. We'll see how things go next year. It's also taken off in the world of entertainment. That's the lead singer of Weezer. Katy Perry meditates. 50 Cent. That dude got shot 9 times. He deserves some peace of mind, in my view. He's meditating. Most tantalizingly, however, we're now seeing meditation being adopted by the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marines, who are spending tens of millions of dollars to research, and the early signs out of this research are very positive. They're researching whether meditation can make smarter, more effective, wiser troops in the field who are less prone to PTSD when they come home. So at this point, I'm almost done. You almost got your credit. I'm just going to make a prediction. Before I do that, I want to issue a slight caveat, which is that historically speaking, my powers of prognostication are reasonably weak. In the early part of the 2000s, I convinced my little brother, to invest in the company that makes the Palm Pilot. It didn't do super well. I don't know if people here, you guys may not even know what it is, which, you know, it's a little bit like, well, anyway, I'm not going to use another example you're not going to know, but the Betamax. That being said, I strongly believe that meditation is the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you had told somebody you were going running, the likely response would have been, who's chasing you? But what happened? The scientists swooped in, they demonstrated the vast benefits of physical exercise, and now we all do it, and if we don't do it, we feel guilty about it. And I think that's where we're headed with meditation. I think that it's going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like exercise, eating well, getting enough sleep, taking the meds your doctor prescribes for you, all the things that we do, and if we don't do, we feel guilty about. I want to make sure I say, however, and this is an important point, but is also a blatant public pitch for my book, there's a reason why I called the book 10% Happier. Meditation, while it is great, is not going to solve all of your problems. And I think for too long in the happiness sphere, we've been sold unrealistic expectations. So the title, while largely a joke, is an attempt to counter-program against what I think is this reckless hope peddled by the self-helpers. While it will not solve all of your problems, I do think it is, as I said before, a major value add, and I can say that from my own very personal perspective. I've been meditating for 6 years now. In many ways, I am the exact same guy I was when I was 28 and really, really ambitious and a workaholic. I still firmly believe that if you want to be great at whatever you're doing, a certain amount of worrying and stress is absolutely necessary. However, we tend to make our suffering worse than it needs to be. And what I've found with meditation is it's helped me draw the line, at least 10% of the time, between what I like to call constructive anguish, useful worrying, and useless rumination. And it has made a huge difference in my life. I will say that if my wife was here, she would give you her 90% still a moron speech. And my little brother, the one who I convinced to invest in the Palm Pilot, he offered up an alternate title to the book, which was From Deeply Flawed to Merely Flawed. I really do think that if meditation can get over its PR problem and strip some of the not-so-helpful residue of the age of Aquarius, it can be made attractive to tens of millions of people who are skeptical and smart who would otherwise reject it. Because at the core of this is a really powerful and empowering idea, which is that I think most of us assume, consciously or subconsciously, that our happiness is contingent upon external factors, like the quality of am I getting good grades? Do I have a significant other? How is my childhood? Do I have enough money in the bank? Those things are all very, very important. But the idea behind meditation is that actually happiness is a skill that you can self-generate and that you can practice just the way you can practice boosting your bicep in the gym. And that is, as I said, a really empowering notion. So I'll leave you with my little tagline, which is, if it can work for a fidgety and skeptical newsman, it can work for you. Thank you for having me back at Colby. I appreciate it. Thank you. I want to quickly add that some things will make you more than 10% happier. There's the baby, Alexander. I thought about naming him Sandy, but went with Alexander. And somebody made an alternate book cover after the book came out, after the baby came out, actually. Thank you again for having me. I'm happy to answer questions. Do we have time for that? Okay, so we've got, do we have mics or anything like that? Or just, okay, there are microphones. Front row right there. Yes. Hi.
So in your book, you referred to this meditation as having cultural baggage, and you just referred to it as having a PR problem. And I'm wondering if you've received any pushback for using terminology like that, and what place the actual cultural tradition of meditation has today.
You mean if people in the traditional meditation community are pissed off at me because I'm making fun of them?
Anybody, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of tempted to say something that I don't only half mean, which is I don't care, but I only half mean that. I do care because the people in the meditation community who have brought meditation to this country have done an enormous service, and it is because of them that we've had the science, and it's because of them that it's come this far. It's because of them that I'm meditating. So in many ways, I see my book as a gateway drug that can get you to actually qualified meditation teachers, which I am not. However, I do think we need a different way of talking about it, because while those who have popularized meditation to the extent that it's popular now have done an enormous service to us, and I think some of these people are historical figures, the way that it is often talked about is off-putting to many people raised in the age of irony. And so I think what we need is just a more diverse group of spokespeople. And I just hope to play a small part in that. And I think there are lots of other people who are now doing it way better than I do. Tim Ryan, who's a member of Congress, big former quarterback, beer-drinking, backslapping guy, talks about meditation better than anybody I know. I think we're seeing really interesting people emerge from the corporate world, like the CEO of Aetna, which is a health insurance company, who talks about meditation in a really cool way. So what I make fun of, but very lovingly, the traditional meditation community, which I am actually a part of. These people are some of my best friends on the planet and have changed my life. But I also think we need to have many ways of talking about it that will reach everybody. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Weston Mensch. So I have a pretty simple question. What time of the day is best for meditating? And if it has worked so well for you, what time of the day do you meditate?
So my whole game is to take away any excuse you might have. And one of the excuses is, it's just not going to fit into my busy schedule. I don't think that's really an excuse you can use when you're a college student, but whatever. Show up at the kegger like 5 minutes late. I don't think it matters. I think the power of look, I've heard it said from teachers who know more than me that it's useful to have a set time at which you do it, and I think that's true. My schedule is nuts. I'm flying all over the country and the world, and on the weekends I work in the mornings, and during the week I work at night. So I don't have a normal schedule in that way. So I just do it when I can fit it in. I have committed to doing it every day, and I do it every day. I view it kind of like exercise. I know I'm going to do it, I just don't know when. I think if it works for you, set a time and try to commit to it. I would also say in terms of time, length of time, I do a lot just because I'm crazy and wrote a whole stupid book about it, but I think 5 to 10 minutes a day is the appropriate way to start. And if you never did any more than that, you're in good shape. The power, in my experience, of the practice derives from its dailiness. It is the daily collision with the asshole in your head that gives you the wherewithal to refuse its shitty suggestions. And that's the game. You just want to be able to have a lens on the chaos in your head and to know that it is, in fact, chaos and that not all of the things that you're thinking have any connection to reality. So that when the idea pops into your head, oh, maybe I should have the 18th cookie, or maybe I should say that stupid thing or whatever, that you might be able to resist some percentage of the time. And that, in my experience, that skill, that ability, mindfulness, in other words, is enhanced from doing it daily rather than doing it once a week for 30 minutes. Thank you. Pleasure. Sir?
What would you say to the administration of this college if they take seriously what you have just suggested?
I have no idea if they take me seriously. Do you take me seriously? He said a little bit. You know, I think it's great when organizations make meditation available to people either who are their employees or, in this case, students. You have to be careful, though. You have to make it available, but you don't want to shove it down people's throats. While meditation now, mindfulness meditation is a secular pursuit, it does, let's be honest, derive from Buddhism. And I think as meditation works its way even further into the mainstream, there are going to be people who push back. So I think it's great to offer it, and it should be offered if the hierarchy views it as important. But it's not entirely simple. But I think for a college community, for young, stressed people who are worried about their grades, worried about the social pressures, worried about what they're going to do after graduation, this is a phenomenal tool. And it's been shown to help with everything from grades to attention. And there's a lot of evidence beyond the ramblings of a TV guy to suggest that this is something that should be taken seriously for every institution. Sir.
So, in my opinion, it's very easy to get started in meditation when you have a group to do it with.
Yeah.
If anybody was really inspired by this talk tonight, Tuesday, Thursday, 4 o'clock, we have meditations led by Jing Yi and Peter Harris, who just asked this question. So if anybody is interested in starting meditation, learning how, those 2 talks. I also started the Mindfulness Club this year. My name's Brian Westerman, and I host a meditation on Sundays at 5 o'clock as well. So Tuesday, 4 o'clock, Thursday, 4 o'clock, Sunday, 5 o'clock, all in the Rose Chapel in Lorimer Chapel. So anybody who's interested, we've got outlets. This thing is happening at Colby College. There are outlets to meditate. There are ways to learn how.
That's great. I love it. I mean, especially when it's being talked about, like, he looks like a cool guy, you know, like, got like biceps and stuff, things that I don't have. I do think that doing it in a group has a real power. It has like an HOV lane effect, in my view. And it's not necessarily there's some sort of alchemy to being in a room and your vibes commingle or whatever. Maybe that's happening, but I really just think that it normalizes it. You're around other people. You could talk to them about your experiences. I hate to be the kind of guy who quotes the Buddha a lot, but when the Buddha was once asked, I believe, what is the importance of having friends on this path of meditation? He said, it's the whole thing. And I think he's right. Far be it from me to argue with the Buddha. I think there is an enormous benefit to surrounding yourself with people who take this seriously. And it doesn't have to devolve into some preachy, self-righteous, holier-than-thou thing. It's really just about being less of an asshole to yourself and to others. So go with God.
Yeah, I think we've got a Twitter question.
I got a Twitter question.
Hi. So at Megan S. Gray was wondering, what did you discover about yourself while writing this book that surprised you?
How hard writing is, man. It sucks. It was terrible. It took me 5 years, and it was horrible. I got 2 great pieces of advice about writing. I suppose we're supposed to be talking about how to write. I feel very underqualified to be talking about how to write, but I got 2 great pieces of advice that I've really found jibed with my personality. And one, Daniel Goleman, who wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, which was eons ago a major bestseller. He said that his way of writing is always to do the easy stuff first. And I actually put that up on my computer for a while. Because if you do the easy things first, you establish this kind of momentum. And then everything else seems a little bit harder. And then when it gets really hard, stop for a little while. The other piece of advice I got was be honest, which sounds really trite, but was incredibly useful in writing a memoir. Because when I was trying to figure out how to say something, if my default was just to tell the truth, even if it's embarrassing, it made the book much better. I don't know if that answers at Megan S. Gray's question. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, yes, let's do it.
At Jack Cohen Photo was wondering.
Why don't you just ask the question? You're right here. That's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Welcome to the digital age. Maintain eye contact, but then...
He was invited to ask a question via
okay.
Twitter. Jack Cohen was wondering, in today's fast-paced and sporadic news environment, how can
You
meditation...
fit this into a tweet?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
How can meditation help handle this barrage of information?
Okay, so I mean, I think that there's a lot of evidence that suggests that it's really good for focus. I mean, we live in an age that has been, I think, appropriately entitled the info blitzkrieg, where we're just constantly, I think, perhaps, I know I've sounded like one of these old guys who's constantly referring to your youth, but you may have actually lived your whole life in this era. When I was here at Colby, we didn't have email. And attention has always been hard to regulate. I mean, I was always looking out the window or doodling during class. But now you have Twitter and texts and emails, and not to mention phone calls and snail mail. You have a million things vying for your attention. And I think in this environment, it is helpful to have a skill that teaches you how to regain your focus. One thing that I've found as a practical piece of advice, on top of just establishing a practice, is unitasking. Multitasking is a lie that we tell ourselves. It is a computer direct. I actually remember, I have a memory is coming back of sitting in Sandy's office and him. I was talking to you about something and you were not affirmatively not listening. You were doing other things, and you actually used a word that I remember. You said, I am polyphasic. You said, I don't even know what that means still. And you were telling me how you can do many things at once. This is demonstrably bullshit, okay? It's not true. This is like the best revenge I've ever had in my life. Soak it in. You can't do it. It's a computer term. We have one processor. Neurologically speaking, this is not up for debate. You can only do one thing at a time. And the studies have shown, there was a study by McKinsey, the consulting firm, I believe, that shows that the American economy loses billions of dollars a year to lost productivity due to multitasking. Because every time you switch between tasks, and usually it's not just two, it's several, every time you go back to the original task, your mind has to ramp back up, and that takes time. So I have found that unitasking, to the best of my ability, has really made a huge difference. So that when I have to write something, not just for my book, but a story or whatever, or even an email, shut down the other programs and just do that. Now, I'm a huge hypocrite. I multitask all the time, but I try to reduce it. And when I do reduce it, I feel better and I do better. There was a study, and I'm one of these guys who's constantly quoting studies, I never realized, but another study out of Harvard that pinged people on their cell phones all day long, asking them, what are you doing right now, and how happy are you? And what they found is that when you're focused at what you're doing, you're happier. And when you're unfocused, you're less happy. It's kind of intuitive. The title of the study was A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind. So that's my advice on that front. Anybody else in the room have a Twitter question? Here you go.
Hi, I'm Holly Hogan, and I'm a junior here at Colby. And you had mentioned earlier in your talk about the issues you found with positivity and the kind of hurrah that comes around that, and this idea that you're always going to be happy all of the time, and if you just change your mind, then you're going to completely change who you are as a person. And it seems to me that what you're saying is more of a realistic approach, and I'm just kind of wondering how, or if you've kind of integrated positivity into how you deal with meditation and sort of the sort of voices that, when you are getting, those impulses to saying to go eat, the 18th cookie or whatever, how are you able to, in your mind, kind of step back and say, okay, like I'm going to be rational here, I'm going to be realistic. That's not what I should do, even if that's what I want to do in that moment.
So, I mean, this is a great question, and there's a lot of parts to it. So let me see if I can break it up. But
Sorry, I talk a lot.
Not at all. It's better than a tweet. So, I am not against having a positive attitude. I just don't. I think we live in a messy world, and you can't just be positive all the time. You can't just command yourself to be positive. Even worse is the power of positive thinking, sometimes called the law of attraction, which is a sort of intellectual cancer unleashed upon us via the self-help movement. And they actually argue that you can, through this law of attraction, get whatever you want, like from a cure to whatever is physically ailing you, to a diamond necklace, to a new boyfriend, just by thinking the right way. This is worse than the whole myth of being polyphasic. I mean, let's just examine the logic. Let's invert it. So, if it is true that your internal reality controls the external realities through sheer positivity, what then do we make of a child born into a refugee camp? Were they thinking negatively in utero? What are we to make of the earthquake in Haiti? That the entire city of Port-au-Prince was thinking negatively and deserved what they got? No, of course not. This is ridiculous. This argument does not pass even the most basic tests of logic. So that being said, I just wanted to go back to what I said at the beginning. I'm not against being positive. One of the, I think, shortcomings of Buddhism, and I would consider myself a Buddhist just for the record, is, to my knowledge, the whole idea of Buddhism, and from what I can tell, is that the mind is trainable, and that you can train yourself to develop all these positive emotional attributes, like mindfulness, compassion, et cetera, which is a really radical and exciting notion. But there isn't anything in there that I've seen, and I've asked around, and I may have missed this, Peter might be able to correct me, anything about gratitude. Very simple thing to do, to cultivate gratitude, and if emotions and are susceptible to training, and the mind is susceptible to training, we ought to be able to train gratitude. And it's not too complicated. I just do this thing before I go to bed at night. I just list all the things I'm psyched about. And I found that really simple mental exercise, A, helps me fall asleep, and B, colors a lot of the rest of my life. It can put in perspective lots of the little things, like a delayed flight or some assignment I don't want, can do to the character of my mental life in any given moment if I really am able to bounce back out of it and say, well, look at these 20 things that are shining examples of awesomeness or whatever. Finally, just to answer the last part of your question about what do you do in that moment with the 18th cookie, I think you're actually setting, there are two ways to deal with it. The mindfulness way is kind of, in some ways, sub-intellectual, right? It's not a cognitive, it's not a thinking, you're not thinking about it, you're noticing, I'm having this urge right now to eat this cookie. I'm feeling it, how it manifests in my body, the kind of thoughts I'm having, and I know, as I see it, it's just a passing thing, and I don't necessarily have to act on it. Then there's the other way to do it, which is what you described, which is to think it through right from the start. This will do X to me, and then the consequences will be 75 more minutes on the elliptical or whatever. I think both are good, but mindfulness is we get taught about how to think our way through problems. Mindfulness is a little bit more in your body rather than in your head, and it allows you to actually see the urge arise and pass without necessarily jumping on the train.
I think we have time for one more question.
In the back. Yeah, he's bringing the mic to you right now.
So I may have a panic attack just sharing this, but when you mentioned the gratitude, myself being a practitioner of mindfulness and also having a gratitude practice, would like to share that a few years ago, it's been 3 years, I was starting a mindfulness practice, and I think it's important to speak to choice because I got the news that I lost my son, And I remember getting up in the morning and making the choice to continue my mindfulness practice. And it was life-changing. It's a choice, and we all have to make choices every day. And what do we value? Are we grateful? Are we mindful? It's, compassion for ourselves and for others. And I'm much more than 10% happier that I have a practice. Thank you.
Well, thank you, first of all, for sharing that. Second, I'm very sorry about what happened to your son. Takes a lot of courage to talk like that, so thank you. And again, my condolences. That cannot be easy, but it is really good, I think, to be in a room full of kids who, when I was your age, you've had really, I think most of you, at least I had at this point in my life, a really golden life. I had not bumped up against the law of impermanence, which is that nothing lasts, including you. This meditation practice that we're talking about here is great training for when you run smack into the hard realities, the vicissitudes of actual life. And they will range from the type of indescribable loss that you just described to getting fired, not being able to get a job, losing a boyfriend or a girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera. Life is like that. Life is great too. And this is training to allow you to enjoy the good moments in a more fulsome way. I actually like to talk about how in psychology they have this concept of a happiness set point. So if you think about, there's a horizontal line. Good things happen, and after a while we revert to our set point. Bad things happen, and after a while we tend to revert back to our set point. With meditation, I've noticed personally that the good part of the graph has gone much higher up because I'm actually enjoying what's happening rather than thinking about what's coming next. And the bad part, the lower part, has become shallower because I'm a little bit better at not going down the rat hole of useless rumination. And meanwhile, the set point itself has gone up. I'm pulling that out of my rear end, but it's true enough. So now that I've demonstrated my very weak grasp of math, why don't we close it there? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.